My desperation for love led me straight into the arms of a wealthy monster, a man who is draining my body, my mind, and even my bank account. To the outside world, I'm the happy wife of a successful executive, but behind closed doors, I'm living a nightmare of infidelity, physical abuse, and the constant insult of being called a gold digger. I've stood on the edge of ending it all, only stepping back for the sake of my innocent son, but against his money and legal power, can I actually save my child? Or am I about to lose everything? But the real questions are, how did an impulsive decision after just 4 months of dating turn a life into a living hell? Why is an independent working woman forced to endure such inhuman torture day after day? And where does this nightmare end? Will she ever escape this gilded cage, or will her existence be crushed by the weight of his wealth? To find the answers and uncover this brutal reality, I'm Sneha. Stay with me as we dive into the full story. Well, the view from the 42nd floor of our downtown penthouse is worth $3 million. That's what the real estate brochure said when my husband Daniel bought it. Floor-to-ceiling glass, a panoramic view of the city skyline that glitters like a sea of diamonds against the pitch black sky. From up here, the cars look like toys and the people are invisible. It's quiet. It's breathtaking. It's a cage. I stood with my forehead pressed against the cold glass, watching the reflection of a woman I barely recognised. She was 31, but the shadows under her eyes made her look 40. She was wearing a silk robe that cost more than my father made in a year back home, but her skin underneath was covered in goosebumps. Not from the air conditioning, but from fear. The digital clock on the stainless steel oven blinked. 11:47 p.m. He wasn't home yet. My heart did that familiar, painful flip it always does when the hour hand creeps past us 11. In a normal marriage, a wife worries if her husband is safe. Is there traffic? Was there an accident? But in this house, in this museum of expensive furniture and frozen emotions, I wasn't worried about his safety. I was terrified of his arrival. I walked over to the kitchen island, my bare feet making no sound on the polished marble. I checked my phone again. No texts, no calls, just a notification from the bank app. Deposit received, City Council payroll, $2,400. I stared at the number. That was my money, my hard-earned money from working 9 to 5 as an administrative assistant at the City Council. It was a respectable job. It was a stable job. But before I could even feel a second of pride, another notification popped up, overlapping the first one. Transfer initiated, $2,400 to Joint Savings Primary Act holder Daniel V. I felt the bile rise in my throat. It happened automatically every 2 weeks. The joint account, the biggest lie in this marriage. It wasn't joint. It was a black hole where my independence went to die. He told everyone, his friends, his family, even my family, that he was managing our portfolio. He said he was investing for our future. But try explaining portfolio management to the cashier at Whole Foods when my debit card gets declined for a box of diapers because he forgot to transfer my allowance to the checking account. Try explaining why the wife of a senior executive, a man who just made vice president, has to beg for $20 to buy a coffee. I put the phone down, face down. I couldn't look at it. A noise, the distinct heavy thud of the private elevator doors sliding open down the hall. My breath hitched. My body went into survival mode instantly. Shoulders hunched, eyes downcast, hands clasped together to stop them from shaking. It's pathetic, really. I manage schedules for city officials. I handle crises at work. I'm a mother to a 4-year-old boy. But the moment that elevator dings, I turn into a ghost in my own home. Heavy footsteps echoed on the hardwood, not the steady rhythm of a sober man. These were slightly uneven, dragging. I didn't move from the kitchen. I pretended to be busy wiping a spot on the already spotless counter. "You're still up," his voice boomed. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. I turned slowly. Daniel stood in the archway of the kitchen, loosening his tie. He was undeniably handsome. That sharp jawline, the expensive suit that fit him perfectly, the aura of power that clung to him like cologne. He looked like the dream man every girl whispers about, but his eyes were glassy, red-rimmed, and devoid of any warmth. I was just getting some water, I stammered. My voice sounded small, foreign to my own ears. "How was the dinner with the investors?" He didn't answer immediately. He walked past me so close that his jacket brushed against my arm. I flinched. Just a micro movement, but he saw it. He always sees it. He opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of sparkling water and slammed the door shut. The noise echoed like a gunshot in the silent apartment. It was fine, he said, taking a long swig. Then he turned to look at me, his gaze travelling up and down my body with a look of pure disdain. Why do you look like that? Like what? I whispered. Like a victim, he sneered. God, it's exhausting coming home to this face. Every day the same tragedy queen act. Do you know how embarrassing it is? The other guys, their wives are vibrant. They're lawyers, doctors. They talk about art, about business. And I'll come home to this. He waved his hand at me as if I were a stain on his perfect floor. I worked today, Daniel, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I had a long day at the council. I picked up Leo from preschool. I cooked dinner. It's almost midnight. You work, he laughed, a cruel, dry sound. You call that work? Pushing papers for the city? My secretary makes more than you, Sneha. You think that little paycheck of yours matters? It doesn't even cover the HOA fees for this building. It matters to me, I said, a sudden spark of defiance igniting in my chest. It's my money. He stopped drinking and the air in the room shifted. It became heavy, suffocating. He took 2 slow steps toward me. I backed up until my hips hit the marble counter. I had nowhere to go. He leaned in, placing one hand on the counter on either side of me, trapping me. I could smell the alcohol on his breath. And underneath that, something else. Floral, sweet, Chanel No. 5. It wasn't my perfume. Your money? He whispered, his face inches from mine. Let's get something straight, sweetheart. You have nothing. You are nothing without me. You think you're independent. You think you're smart. You're a charity case I picked up. My mother was right. She warned me. She said, Daniel, watch out for the quiet ones. They're just hungry for the lifestyle. You're nothing but a glorified gold digger who got lucky. I never asked for your money, I cried out, the tears finally spilling over. I pay for my own clothes. I pay for my transport. You take everything else. I take care of the future, he shouted, slamming his fist onto the counter next to my hand. I jumped, a stifled scream escaping my lips. And don't you dare raise your voice at me, he hissed, his eyes narrowing into slits. I am the reason you are in this country, living like a queen. I am the reason your son goes to that private preschool. You want to talk about money? Fine, leave. Walk out that door right now. But remember one thing. He grabbed my chin, his fingers digging into my skin, hard enough to leave marks. You walk out alone. Leo stays. My lawyers will eat you alive, but you'll be back in some rat-infested apartment in the suburbs within a week and you will never see your son again. Is that what you want? Oh, I couldn't breathe. The threat hung in the air, paralysing me. He knew my weak spot. He knew that Leo was the only reason I was still breathing. He released my face with a shove, looking disgusted. That's what I thought. Now get out of my sight. You're ruining my mood. He turned his back on me and walked toward the living room, pulling his phone out to text someone, probably her, the owner of the floral perfume. I stood there trembling, clutching the edge of the counter to keep from collapsing. My reflection in the dark window stared back at me, a woman in a golden cage with invisible chains wrapped around her throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab a knife from the block and shred the expensive leather sofa. I wanted to run. But then a small noise came from the hallway. Mommy! I froze. I quickly wiped my eyes, swallowing the sob that was stuck in my throat. I turned around to see Leo, my 4-year-old son, standing there in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing his sleepy eyes. He looked so small, so innocent. Leo, baby! I whispered, rushing over to him and scooping him up. He felt warm and solid in my arms, the only real thing in this fake world. I heard loud noises, he mumbled into my neck. Is Daddy mad again? My heart shattered into a million pieces. A 4-year-old shouldn't know what Daddy is mad again means. He shouldn't have to recognise the tone of a threat. No, baby, I lied, stroking his hair. Daddy's just tired. Everything is okay. Mummy is here. I carried him back to his room, passing the living room where Daniel was now pouring himself a glass of scotch, completely ignoring us. He didn't even look at his son. I laid Leo down in his bed, tucking the duvet around him. He fell asleep almost instantly, his hand clutching my finger. I sat there in the dark, watching him breathe. The adrenaline was slowly fading, replaced by a cold, hard dread. How did I get here? 5 years ago, I was lonely, yes, but I was free. I had dreams. I had a name. Now I am just Daniel's wife. I am the woman who smiles at galas while her husband holds her waist a little too tightly. I am the woman who wears long sleeves to hide the grip marks. I looked around Leo's room. Expensive toys, designer clothes, but no peace. I slowly pulled my finger from Leo's grip and walked to the bathroom attached to the nursery. I turned on the light and looked at my chin. There were 3 distinct red marks where his fingers had dug in. By morning, warning, they would be bruises. I opened the cabinet and reached for the heavy concealer I bought last week. I knew I would need it. As I stared at the red marks, a memory flashed in my mind. The airport in Chicago. The way he smiled at me when I surprised him. The way he told his friend, I'm bringing her home. I thought it was the most romantic moment of my life. I didn't know then that I wasn't a partner he was bringing home. I was a souvenir, a trophy. And like any trophy, once the shine wears off, it just gathers dust on a shelf, or worse. It gets broken. I turned off the light, leaving myself in darkness. From the living room, I heard Daniel's voice. He was on the phone, laughing. A soft, intimate laugh that he hadn't used with me in years. Yeah, she's asleep, he said. Don't worry, she's too scared to do anything. She's not going anywhere. I stood in the dark hallway, my hands clenched into fists. She's not going anywhere. He was so sure. He thought he owned me. He thought the money, the threats and the fear were enough to keep me silent forever. But as I touched the tender skin on my jaw, something shifted inside me. It wasn't hope. Hope had died a long time ago. It was something colder, something dangerous. He forgot one thing about people who have nothing left to lose. They stopped being afraid of the fall. I went back into the bedroom, not to sleep, but to think. Because tonight, for the first time, I realised that the cage door wasn't locked by him. It was locked by my own fear. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to find the key. But I had no idea that tomorrow everything was about to get so much worse. I thought I knew the depths of his cruelty. I was wrong. The game was just beginning and I was about to find out exactly what happens when you try to run from a man who believes he owns your soul. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the marks on my chin in the vanity mirror, but my mind was thousands of miles away. It was drifting back to a time when I thought Daniel's touch was the only thing keeping me alive, not the thing that would eventually try to destroy me. 5 years ago. It feels like a different lifetime. It feels like a movie I watched starring a girl who looked like me but had none of my scars. I was 26 then. I was living in a shoebox studio apartment in a grimy part of the city, eating instant ramen and working 2 jobs just to pay off my student loans. I was invisible. That's the only way to describe it. I was the girl who made your coffee, the girl who filed your taxes, the girl you walked past on the subway without a second glance. I had no family to fall back on. My mother was gone and my father was a ghost who only materialised when he needed money. I was starving, not for food, but for belonging. I wanted someone to look at me and see me. Then I met Daniel. It happened in the most mundane way possible. A spilled latte in a crowded elevator lobby. He was wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my tuition. I was wearing a thrift store blazer. He didn't yell. He didn't look at me with disgust. He smiled. He handed me a handkerchief with his initials embroidered on it. Rough start to the Monday, he had asked, his voice deep and smooth like expensive whiskey. That was it. That was the hook. For the next 4 months, I was high. There is no other word for it. Being with Daniel was like being injected with pure adrenaline. He was 32, established, confident, and he wanted me. He sent flowers to my cubicle, huge bouquets of lilies that made my co-workers whisper in jealousy. He took me to dinners where the menus didn't have prices. He listened to my stories about my lonely childhood and held my hand across the table, his thumb stroking my knuckles, promising me that I'd never be lonely again. I didn't see the red flags. I saw them as protection. When he texted me every hour asking where I was, I thought it was care. When he made fun of my friends until I stopped seeing them, I thought it was because he wanted me all to himself. When he told me what to wear, I thought he was just helping me level up. I was so desperate to be loved that I handed him the blueprint to my destruction. Then came the day that sealed my fate. The Chicago trip. I was supposed to be working at the main office for a few days to assist with a merger. Daniel had told me he was flying out to Chicago for a boring conference. I remember packing my bag, feeling a flutter of excitement in my chest. I had this childish, romantic idea. I would surprise him. I would show up at his hotel wearing that red dress he liked, and we would have a magical weekend in the Windy City. I checked my flight details, gate B4. As I was walking down the jet bridge, struggling with my carry-on, I heard a laugh, a familiar laugh. I looked up and my heart stopped. There he was, Daniel. He was 3 people ahead of me in the line for first class. He wasn't alone. He was with 2 other men, his boys, the wealthy frat boy types he did business with. They were loud, taking up space, acting like they owned the airport. Daniel, I called out, my face lighting up. He turned. For a split second, a fraction of a second that I've replayed in my head 1,000 times since, his face twisted. It wasn't joy, it was panic, it was annoyance. His eyes darted to his friends, then back to me. But then the mask slipped back on. Sneha! He stepped out of line, a wide, dazzling smile plastered on his face. Babe, what are you doing here? I'm heading to the head office for work, I beamed, rushing over to hug him. I wanted to surprise you at the hotel later, but wow, we're on the same flight. He hugged me back, but his body was stiff. He pulled away quickly. That's incredible. What a coincidence. His friends were staring at me. They were looking me up and down like I was a piece of meat on a display counter. Who's the smoke show, Danny? One of them asked, smirking. This is Sneha, Daniel said, his arm going around my waist, tight, possessive. My girlfriend. Girlfriend? The other guy laughed. Damn, you weren't kidding. She is a looker. I felt uncomfortable, but I smiled politely. Daniel quickly steered me away. Look, babe, I'm in first class with the guys. We have some work to discuss, but when we land, I'm all yours. He kissed my forehead. It felt like a promise. When we landed in Chicago, the dynamic shifted. The work he had to do seemed to vanish. He was manic almost. He pulled me into a cab with his friends. Change of plans, he announced, his eyes glittering. We're not staying in Chicago. We're going to the house in the suburbs for a pre-party. Then we're heading out. Out where? I asked, confused. Vegas, baby! His friend shouted from the front seat. What? But I have work tomorrow. I started. Call in sick, Daniel whispered in my ear, his hand sliding up my thigh. Live a little, Sneha. Don't be so boring. Do you want to be a secretary your whole life, or do you want to be with me? The way he said it, it was a challenge, a test. I called in sick. We went to his friend's massive estate first. It was terrifyingly grand. I felt small, out of place, in my off-the-rack clothes while his friends' wives wandered around in designer silk. That's when I heard it. I was in the powder room fixing my makeup when I heard Daniel's voice in the hallway. He was on the phone. Yeah, she's here. I know. Look, she surprised me on the plane. What was I supposed to do? Send her home? Pause. No, I'm not just hooking up with her. She's different. She's obsessed with me. It's easy. Pause. And then a woman's voice on the other end, loud enough for me to hear through the speaker. It was the wife of the friend who owned the house. Daniel, stop bringing your random flings to my house unless there's a ring on her finger. I don't want some random girl near my kids. It's trashy. My heart sank. Trashy. That's what they thought of me. I opened the door, tears stinging my eyes. Daniel saw me. He saw the hurt on my face. He hung up the phone immediately. You heard that, he said. I'm leaving. I whispered. I'm not staying where I'm not wanted. I started walking toward the door, my dignity hanging by a thread. I was ready to walk out of his life. Wait! He grabbed my arm. He spun me around. The look in his eyes was wild, intense. Don't go. Screw them. Screw what they think. They think I'm a whore, Daniel. I cried. They think I'm just some girl you're using for the weekend. Then let's prove them wrong, he said breathlessly. How? He pulled me close, his hands cupping my face. Let's get married right now. Tonight, we'll take the jet to Vegas, just you and me. We'll show them. We'll show everyone that this is real. My brain stopped working. Married? Daniel, we've only known each other for 4 months. When you know, he interrupted, staring deep into my soul. I can't live without you, Sneha. You're the only real thing in my life. Don't you feel it? The connection? I did feel it. I felt it in my bones. I was a drowning woman and he was the raft. He was offering me everything I ever wanted. A family, a home, love. He was choosing me over his snobby friends. He was fighting for me. Or so I thought. Yes, I whispered. Yes. The next 6 hours were a blur of champagne, private jets and neon lights. We landed in Las Vegas at 2 a.m. We went straight to one of those 24-hour chapels. It wasn't romantic. It smelled like stale cigarettes and cheap perfume. His friends were there. They had come along for the show. They stood in the back snickering, taking bets on how long it would last. But I didn't care. I was looking at Daniel. He looked like a prince. We said the vows to have and to hold, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health. I meant every word. I cried when he slipped the ring on my finger, a diamond that was too big. Too heavy. I own you now, he whispered in my ear as he kissed me. I laughed, thinking it was a joke, a sexy, possessive joke. I didn't know he was stating a fact. We flew back the next morning. I called my father. He didn't ask if I was happy. He asked, is he rich? When I said yes, he said, good. Don't screw it up. Daniel's family was a different story. When we went to his parents' estate to break the news, the silence was deafening. His mother looked at me like I was a cockroach that had crawled onto her Persian rug. No prenup? His father asked, ignoring me completely. It was spur of the moment, Dad. Daniel said, shrugging, pouring himself a drink. Besides, she doesn't have anything to protect, and you have everything to lose, his mother hissed. She's fine, Mum. She's manageable, Daniel said. He was standing right next to me, but he talked about me like I wasn't there, like I was a new car he had bought on impulse. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The honeymoon phase had ended the moment the ink dried on the marriage certificate. Back in the present, sitting on my bed, I touched the cold metal of that same wedding ring. It felt like a shackle. That night in Vegas, I thought I was winning the jackpot. I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world. I didn't realise that the house always wins. I didn't realise that by saying I do. I was signing away my freedom, my voice and my sanity. I looked at the clock. 3 a.m. The door to the bedroom creaked open. My heart hammered against my ribs. I quickly lay down and pulled the covers up to my chin, pretending to be asleep. Daniel walked in. He didn't turn on the light. He walked to the side of the bed and stood over me. I could feel his gaze burning into my closed eyelids. He smelled of smoke and another woman's sweat. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. I know you're awake, Sneha, he whispered. His voice was cold, devoid of the warmth he had used to trap me 5 years ago. Stop pretending. You're terrible at it. He straightened. The ink on the marriage license hadn't even dried before the financial handcuffs were slapped onto my wrists. It started subtly. It always does. That's the genius of a predator. They don't hunt you with a roar. They hunt you with a smile. 2 weeks after Vegas, we were sitting in a plush leather office at Chase Bank. The banker, a man with a shiny bald head and a cheap suit, was typing furiously on his keyboard. Daniel was sitting next to me, his hand resting on my knee. To an outsider, it looked affectionate. To me, it felt like a paperweight keeping me pinned to the chair. It just makes sense, babe, Daniel said, his voice smooth as silk. We're a team now, a unit. Why keep separate accounts? It's messy. I have a wealth management team that handles everything. If we pool our resources, we can maximise the interest. I'm doing this for us. For us. That phrase was his favourite weapon. But I like having my own account, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It's my paycheck. From the city council. Daniel let out a short, patronising chuckle. He squeezed my knee just a little too hard. Sneha, honey, let's be real. Your paycheck is cute. It's supplemental. Compared to my bonuses, it's basically pocket change. I'm just trying to take the burden off you. You shouldn't have to worry about bills or rent or taxes. I'll handle the heavy lifting. You just enjoy being my wife. The banker looked at me, waiting. I felt small. I felt ungrateful. Here was this successful, wealthy man wanting to take care of me, and I was arguing over my meagre administrative salary. So I signed the paper that authorised the direct deposit of my entire salary into a joint account. I signed the paper that gave him primary administrative rights. I didn't know I was signing a death warrant for my independence. The reality of my new life hit me a month later at a grocery store. I was standing in the checkout line at Whole Foods. The cart was full. Organic kale, imported cheese, premium steaks. Daniel had a specific diet. He liked specific brands. If I bought the wrong mustard, he would sigh, push the plate away and order takeout, leaving my cooked meal to go cold. It was a silent punishment that hurt more than screaming. The cashier rang everything up. That'll be $342. I swiped the platinum card Daniel had given me. Declined. My stomach dropped. Try it again, please. There must be a mistake. She swiped it again. The machine let out a harsh mechanical buzz. Declined. The line behind me was growing. I could feel the eyes burning into my back. A woman in a yoga outfit tapped her foot impatiently. Let me call my husband, I stammered, my face burning with humiliation. I stepped aside and dialed Daniel. He answered on the second ring. What? He sounded annoyed. He was always annoyed during work hours. Daniel, the card. It's not working. I'm at the store. Oh, right, he said, his tone casual. Bored. I put a limit on it. You spent too much last week. Too much, I whispered, trying not to cry in front of the rotisserie chickens. I bought curtains for the guest room, like you asked. You overpaid, he stated flatly. You're bad with money, Sneha. You don't understand the value of $1 because you've never really had any. I'm teaching you discipline. Just put some stuff back. Stick to the budget. What budget? You never gave me a budget. Figure it out. I have a meeting. Click. I stood there, the phone dead in my hand. I had to walk back to the register, apologise profusely and start removing items from the bags while the people behind me rolled their eyes. I took out the steaks. I took out the expensive wine. I kept the essentials. I paid with the $20 bill I had hidden in my phone case, my emergency fund that I'd started keeping from the cash tips I used to get at my old job, which I didn't have anymore. I walked home in the rain because I couldn't afford an Uber, carrying heavy bags that cut into my fingers. When I got home, Daniel was there lounging on the sofa watching ESPN. He looked at the wet, miserable creature standing in the doorway. "Did you get the steaks?" he asked, not looking away from the TV. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "The card declined. I had to put them back." He sighed, a long, exaggerated sound of disappointment. "Useless. I work all day to provide this penthouse, this life, and you can't even manage a simple grocery run. Order a pizza and don't use the card, use the cash in the jar." That was the night I realised I wasn't a wife. I was an unpaid intern with benefits. But the financial strangulation was only one part of the torture. The other part was his family. Every Sunday we had to go to his parents' estate in the Hamptons or their townhouse in the Upper East Side. It was a ritual, a performance. His mother, Eleanor, was a woman made of ice and pearls. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. Her eyes did all the cutting. One Sunday, about 6 months into the marriage, we were sitting at their long mahogany dining table. The silverware was heavy silver. The china was older than my country. "So, Sneha," Eleanor said, dabbing her mouth with a linen napkin, "Daniel tells us you're still working at that city job." "Yes," I said, trying to sound proud. "I just got a small raise, actually. I'm handling the schedule for the district councilman now." Eleanor exchanged a look with her daughter, Jessica. Jessica was a corporate lawyer, sharp and vicious. "That's quaint," Jessica said, smirking. "But doesn't it feel a bit pointless? I mean, Daniel makes in a bonus what you make in 5 years. Why bother? Unless you're trying to prove something." "I like working," I said defensively. "I like having my own career." "Career?" Eleanor laughed softly. It was a chilling sound. "Oh, honey, that's a job, not a career." And honestly, it's a bit embarrassing for Daniel. People ask why his wife is answering phones for the city. "It looks like he can't support you." "I support her plenty," Daniel chimed in, taking a sip of his wine. He didn't look at me. He was smiling at his mother. "But you know how she is, Mom. She likes to feel independent. It's a phase. She'll get over it once she realises where the real money comes from." The table went silent. My face was on fire. He had just reduced my entire identity, my hard work, my pride to a phase. He had just confirmed to them that I was a child playing dress up. "Well," Eleanor said, her eyes landing on my necklace, a simple gold chain my father had given me for my high school graduation. It was the only jewellery I owned that wasn't from Daniel. "Just make sure you don't embarrass him, dear. We have a reputation. We don't want people thinking Daniel married a charity case." I gripped the fork so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to tell them that their son, their precious Daniel, controlled every cent I earned, that he made me beg for tampon money, that he checked the mileage on my car to make sure I wasn't going anywhere he didn't approve of. But I said nothing. I swallowed the rage along with the dry roast beef because I was trapped. I had tried to tell my family back home. I called my sister once crying. "He controls everything," I sobbed. "I have no money. He humiliates me." "Is he hitting you?" she asked. "No, not really. He pushes me sometimes. He grabs me hard, but no bruises." "Sneha," she sighed, "you're in America. You're living the dream. Every marriage has problems. Dad is so proud of you. He tells everyone his son-in-law is a big executive. Don't ruin this. If you leave, where will you go? You have no savings. You can't come back here. The neighbours will talk. Just be patient. Cook him good food." Men are like that. He's just stressed. Be patient. So I was patient. I became a master of silence. I learned to hide the receipts. I learned to walk softly. But the chains were getting tighter. One evening, I came home late and the bus had broken down and I had to wait 40 minutes for the next one. When I walked in, Daniel was waiting. He wasn't drinking. That was worse. When he was sober and angry, he was calculated. He was holding my phone bill. "Who is this?" he asked, pointing to a number. That's my old college friend, Mark. He just moved to the city." He texted to say hi. Daniel's face went blank. He walked over to me, towering over my frame. "Mark? A guy? We're just friends, Daniel. I haven't seen him in years." "You think I'm stupid?" he whispered. "You think I don't know what you're doing? You're looking for a backup plan. You're shopping around." No, I swear. You're a liar, he spat, and I don't pay for liars. He took my phone, the latest iPhone he had bought me, and smashed it onto the marble floor. The screen shattered into 1,000 spider webs. From now on, I check your messages every night. If I see a man's name, any man, even a co-worker, you lose the phone permanently. Do you understand? I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Yes, good. He stepped over the broken phone and kissed my forehead. I'm protecting you, Sneha. Men only want one thing. I'm the only one who actually cares about you. He gaslit me so well that part of me believed him. Maybe I was being disrespectful. Maybe I shouldn't have texted Mark. Maybe he really was just protective. I was losing my mind. The girl I used to be, the ambitious, bright, hopeful girl, was dying. Then everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning. I had been feeling sick for a week, nauseous, dizzy. I thought it was the stress. I thought my body was finally shutting down from the anxiety. I took the test in the bathroom while Daniel was at work. My hands were shaking so hard. I almost dropped the stick. I waited 3 minutes, the longest 3 minutes of my life. 2 pink lines. Pregnant. I sat on the cold tile floor, clutching the stick. A wave of emotion crashed over me. Fear, yes. Terror, absolutely. But hope, yes, hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the miracle we needed. His parents wanted a grandchild. Daniel talked about legacy all the time. If I gave him a child, a son, maybe he would soften. Maybe he would respect me. Maybe the abuse would stop. I imagined a baby, someone to love, someone who would love me back unconditionally. I wouldn't be alone in this big, empty house anymore. I waited for him to come home that night. I cooked his favourite meal, lamb chops with rosemary. I wore the dress he liked. When he walked in, I was smiling for the first time in months. Real smiling. What's with you? He asked, loosening his tie, eyeing the table. I have news, I said, my heart pounding. I handed him the small gift box. He opened it. He saw the positive test. He stared at it for a long time. The silence stretched until it felt like a rubber band about to snap. Then he looked up at me. I expected a smile. I expected a hug. I expected tears of joy. Instead, his face darkened. His eyes narrowed. Are you sure it's mine? The question hit me like a physical blow. The air left my lungs. What? I gasped. You heard me, he said coldly, tossing the test onto the table like it was garbage. You've been texting that Mark guy. How do I know you didn't trap me? You know how this looks, right? The gold digger secures her payday with a baby. Classic move, Sneha. Textbook. How can you say that? I screamed, the pain tearing through my chest. I have never touched another man. This is your child. He stood up, kicking the chair back. We'll see, but don't think this changes anything. If anything, you're on a tighter leash now, because if that thing in your stomach is mine, I own it too, just like I own you. He walked out of the room, leaving me standing there with the cold lamb chops and a broken heart. I placed my hand on my stomach. I had thought a baby would be my saviour. I thought it would be my key to freedom, or at least to mercy. But as I stood there in the dim light, listening to the heavy footsteps of the man I feared upstairs, I realised the terrifying truth. This baby wasn't a key, it was an anchor, and I was sinking fast. I just didn't know that the storm was about to get violent. The psychological torture was over. Now that I was carrying his heir, my body was no longer mine to protect. The real nightmare, the physical one, was just beginning. If you think a prison has to have iron bars and armed guards, you've never lived in a high-rise penthouse while pregnant with a millionaire's child. My pregnancy wasn't a journey of motherhood. It was a corporate project. Daniel managed it the same way he managed a merger. He hired the best obstetrician in the city, not because he cared about my health, but because he wanted to ensure the asset arrived in perfect condition. He hired a nutritionist who came to the house 3 times a week to inspect my pantry. No sugar, no carbs, no joy. You're gaining too much weight in your face, Daniel told me one evening, poking my cheek with a fork while we ate our kale salad. My partner's wives bounce back in 3 weeks. Don't get lazy, Sneha. Stretch marks are expensive to fix. I swallowed the insult along with the tasteless greens. I rubbed my belly under the table, whispering apologies to the baby growing inside me. I'm sorry your father is a monster. I'm sorry. When Leo was born, the dynamic shifted instantly. It was a difficult labour. 20 hours of agony. me. Daniel was in the room, but he spent 18 of those hours on a conference call with Tokyo, pacing the corner of the VIP suite, complaining about the Wi-Fi signal. When the nurse told him to hold my hand, he looked at her like she had asked him to touch toxic waste. I'm closing a deal here, he snapped. She's fine. Women have been doing this for centuries. But when Leo finally came out, screaming, red and perfect, Daniel's demeanour changed. He didn't look at me. He looked at the boy. He held him up like a prize he had won at a carnival. A son, he whispered, a terrifying glint of pride in his eyes. Not love. Pride. A legacy. He named him Leo, Latin for lion. He didn't ask me. He just filled out the birth certificate while I was passed out from exhaustion. For the first few months, things were quiet. Daniel was obsessed with showing off his heir. He was the doting father on Instagram, posting photos of tiny designer sneakers and captioning them future CEO. But as Leo grew out of the cute infant stage and into a toddler who cried through tantrums and needed constant attention, Daniel's interest faded. He went back to work harder than before. And then came the promotion. He made vice president of the entire North American division. It was huge. The salary bump was astronomical. The stock options were insane, and his ego exploded. If he was arrogant before, he became godlike now. He walked differently. He talked differently. He started buying custom Italian suits that cost $5,000 a pop. He traded his luxury sedan for a flashy sports car that roared like a beast. And me, I became a liability. The turning point was the annual gala. This wasn't just a company party. This was the event of the season. Senators, tech moguls, old money families, everyone would be there. 2 days before the event, Daniel came home with a garment bag. He threw it on the bed. "Wear this," he commanded. I unzipped the bag. It was a dress, a stunning floor-length gown in emerald green, backless, plunging neckline. It was beautiful, but it was aggressive. It was a dress meant for a runway model, not a tired mother who worked at a 9-to-5 job. "Daniel, it's a bit much," I said, holding it up. "Can't I wear the navy dress I have? It's elegant and—" "Burn that navy dress," he interrupted, fixing his cufflinks in the mirror. "You look like a librarian in it. You are the wife of a vice president now, Sneha. You need to look the part. You are my billboard. When people look at you, they need to see my success. Do not embarrass me. Do not embarrass me." That was his mantra. On the night of the gala, I felt like an imposter. I was wearing Spanx that cut off my circulation, heels that made my calves scream, and diamond earrings that Daniel had rented. Yes, rented, because he didn't trust me to own them. We walked into the ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton. The chandelier was the size of a small house. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Daniel gripped my elbow. His fingers dug into the nerve, sending a jolt of pain up my arm. "Smile," he hissed through his teeth, while waving at a man across the room. "And for God's sake, don't talk about your little job. Nobody here cares about the city council filing system. Just nod, sip your champagne, and look pretty." We approached a group of men and women standing near the ice sculpture. Daniel turned on the charm instantly, and he was magnetic. He laughed, he joked, he shook hands. "And this must be the lovely wife," a tall man with silver hair said. He was the CEO. "This is Sneha," Daniel said, presenting me like a new car. "Pleasure," the CEO said. He turned to the woman next to him. "Have you met Linda? She's our chief legal officer." Linda was striking. Sharp bob cut power suit that looked feminine yet terrifying. Eyes that scanned me like a barcode reader. "Nice to meet you, Sneha," Linda said. Her voice was confident. "Daniel tells us you're in administration." The way she said it. Administration, like it was a disease. "Yes," I said, trying to stand tall. "I work for the city council. I manage the—" "She helps out down at the city hall," Daniel interrupted, his laugh loud and fake. "Keeps her busy, you know. I tell her she doesn't need to work, but she likes the routine." He made it sound like a hobby, like finger painting. "That's sweet." Another woman joined in. She was introduced as a neurosurgeon. "It's good to have a little distraction. My husband stays home with our twins, but honestly, with my surgery schedule, I barely see him." The circle of women began to talk. They talked about market volatility. They talked about a recent Supreme Court ruling. They talked about their board meetings in London and Hong Kong. I stood there clutching my champagne glass, completely silent. I had a degree. I was smart. I read the news. But in this circle, I was nothing. I was the admin. I was the diversity hire in my own marriage. "So, Sneha, the neurosurgeon asked, turning to me suddenly. What do you think about the new zoning laws since you're at the council? Oh, I froze. I actually knew about this. I had an opinion. I opened my mouth to speak. Actually, the impact on low-income housing is... Oh, she doesn't handle policy, Daniel cut in, his hands squeezing my waist so hard I almost dropped my glass. She's in scheduling. She books the conference rooms, right, babe? He looked at me. His eyes were dead. They dared me to correct him. I felt my soul shrink. I felt $1,800 worth of makeup melting on my face. Oh, right, I whispered. I just booked the rooms. The women exchanged looks, that pitying look and the look that said, oh, she's one of those. The pretty face with nothing upstairs. The trophy. They turned away from me and went back to discussing interest rates. I was effectively erased from the conversation. For the rest of the night, I stood by Daniel's sides like a mannequin. I smiled until my jaw ached. I watched him flirt with other women, successful women, powerful women. I saw the way he looked at Linda, the lawyer. He looked at her with respect. He looked at me with ownership. He wanted a trophy wife to show off, but he hated that I wasn't a power wife to match his ego. It was a paradox. I couldn't win. If I didn't work, I was lazy. If I worked my normal job, I was embarrassing. On the ride home, the silence in the car was heavier than the humid night air. Daniel was driving too fast, weaving through traffic on the highway. You were quiet tonight, he said, staring straight ahead. You told me to be, I replied softly. I didn't tell you to be a mute, he snapped. God, it was painful watching you try to keep up. Did you see, Linda? Did you see how she commanded the room? That's class, Sneha. That's a partner. I'm not a lawyer, Daniel. I never claimed to be. No, you're not, he sneered. You're just average. I bring you into this world of excellence and you just drag me down. Do you know what the CEO asked me when you went to the bathroom? I didn't want to know, but I asked anyway. What? He asked if you were a mail order bride. The air left the car. He didn't, I gasped. He did. He was joking, of course, but there's truth in every joke, isn't there? You don't fit in, Sneha. You stick out like a sore thumb. Everyone there earned their spot. You just married into it. Tears stung my eyes, blurring the city lights rushing past us. I try, Daniel. I try so hard to make you happy. Trying isn't enough anymore, he said, and his voice dropping to a dangerous low. I'm a VP now. I'm going to be CEO one day. I need a woman who can sit at the table, not someone who serves the coffee. He pulled the car into our building's garage and slammed the brakes. He turned to me, his face illuminated by the dashboard lights. He looked demonic. You need to step up or I'll find someone who will. He got out of the car and slammed the door, leaving me sitting in the dark garage. I sat there for 20 minutes, shivering in my backless dress. I'll find someone who will. It wasn't a threat, it was a plan. I went upstairs eventually. Daniel was already in the shower. I went to the nursery to check on Leo. He was sleeping soundly, clutching his teddy bear. I knelt beside his crib, burying my face in the soft mattress. I'm sorry, Leo, I sobbed silently. Mummy isn't smart enough. Mummy isn't successful enough. I felt a deep, rotting shame in my gut. He had managed to make me feel worthless. He had managed to make me believe that his abuse was my fault because I wasn't worthy of his status. But as I stood up and wiped my face, I noticed something. Daniel's phone was on the hallway table. It lit up with a notification. It wasn't a work email. It wasn't a text from his boss. It was a Snapchat notification from a user named Bella_XOXO. The message preview read, can't believe you had to leave early. The after party is just getting started. Miss you, Daddy. My blood ran cold. Daddy. He wasn't talking about Leo. The humiliation at the party was just a smokescreen, and he wasn't angry because I wasn't smart enough. He wasn't angry because I embarrassed him. He was angry because I was in the way. He was already replacing me, but he wasn't looking for a power wife like Linda the lawyer. He was looking for a plaything. I stared at the phone. I knew the passcode. He thought I didn't, but I'd seen him type it in 1,000 times. My hand hovered over the screen. If I unlocked it, there was no going back. If I saw what I thought I would see, the ignorance would be over. The war would begin. I took a breath, a shaky, terrified breath. I pressed the code. 1492. The phone unlocked. And what I saw next didn't just break my heart. It shattered my reality. I thought I knew pain. I thought I knew betrayal. But as I scrolled through the messages, the photos, the dates, I realised I'd been sleeping next to a stranger, a dangerous, depraved stranger. And he wasn't just cheating. Oh no, that would have been too simple. He was planning something. There were messages to a lawyer, not his corporate lawyer, a divorce attorney. How do we ensure she gets nothing? Daniel had asked. Prove she's unstable, the lawyer had replied. Document everything. Push her until she snaps. If she looks crazy, you get the kid and you keep the house alone. I dropped the phone on the carpet. He wasn't just unhappy. He was gaslighting me on purpose. He was trying to drive me insane. He was poking me, humiliating me, starving me of money, all to build a case file labelled unstable mother. He wanted to take Leo. He wanted to take my son and throw me in the trash. I looked at the bathroom door. The shower was still running. Fear evaporated. Sadness vanished. In their place, a cold, hard rage began to crystallise. "You want crazy, Daniel?" I whispered to the empty hallway. "I'll show you crazy." But I knew I couldn't fight him with money. I couldn't fight him with status. I had to fight him in the shadows. The game had changed. I was no longer fighting for his love. I was fighting for my survival. And tonight, the trophy wife died. The mother was born. And God help him when he steps out of that shower. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. I wiped the screen on my pyjama leg to remove my fingerprints. I adjusted the angle so it aligned perfectly with the edge of the hallway table, just as he had left it. My heart was beating so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, a whoosh whoosh sound that drowned out the hum of the refrigerator. The shower water stopped. Panic clawed at my throat. I couldn't let him see me like this. I couldn't let him see the knowledge in my eyes. If he knew that I knew about his plan, about the lawyer, the unstable narrative, the plot to steal Leo, he would accelerate the timeline. He would discard me tonight. I ran to the bedroom, my bare feet silent on the plush carpet. I dove under the duvet, pulling it up to my chin and squeezed my eyes shut. I forced my breathing to slow down. In, 2, 3, out. 2, 3. Daniel walked in a moment later. I could smell the steam rolling off him, mixed with the expensive sandalwood soap he used. He moved around the room with the arrogance of a man who sleeps soundly because he has no conscience. He checked his phone. I heard the click of the lock screen. He didn't notice a thing. He climbed into bed, turning his back to me immediately. He didn't say goodnight. He didn't touch me. He just took up his space, pushing me to the very edge of the mattress. I stared at the back of his head in the darkness. I wanted to strangle him. I wanted to scream, but I lay frozen, realising that the man sleeping next to me wasn't my husband. He was an enemy combatant, and I was behind enemy lines without a weapon. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in acting. I woke up every morning and made his coffee. I ironed his shirts. I kissed his cheek when he left for work. I played the role of the submissive, average wife he wanted, all while my insides were screaming. But while he was at work, I was no longer just crying in the nursery. I was hunting. I couldn't hire a private investigator. I had no money, so I became one. I started tracking the mileage on his Porsche. I checked the Ease Pass toll history online. He hadn't changed the password since we bought the car. He said he was at the office in Midtown. The toll showed he was crossing the bridge into Brooklyn, into a trendy neighborhood where the cool crowd lived, where Bella_XOXO probably lived. I went through his pockets when he threw his laundry in the hamper, and then on a Thursday night, I found it. He came home late, claiming a client dinner ran long. He went straight to the shower, dumping his blazer on the chair. I picked it up. It smelled of smoke and gin. I checked the inner pocket. Nothing. I checked the side pockets. My fingers brushed against something small and hard, a piece of paper. It was a receipt from a boutique hotel in Soho, the Lover's Suite. $850 for 4 hours. And below that item, another charge, room service, champagne, strawberries, oysters. The date was today. The timestamp was 7:30 p.m. While I was feeding Leo his macaroni and cheese, Daniel was feeding oysters to a girl young enough to be his intern. I stared at the receipt, my hands trembling. This was it. This was proof, not just of the affair, but of the money he was spending. He claimed we were on a budget while blowing $1,000 on a Tuesday afternoon fling. I heard the bathroom door open. Daniel walked out, drying his hair with a towel. He was wearing sweatpants, looking relaxed, looking smug. "Did you pick up my dry cleaning?" he asked, not even looking at me. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was a physical reaction, like vomiting the bile of 5 years of silence, 5 years of insults, 5 years of being treated like a parasite just erupted. "No," I said. My voice was low, shaking. He stopped toweling his hair and he turned to look at me, his eyebrows raised. "Excuse me, I didn't pick up your dry cleaning," I said, louder this time. I held up the crumpled receipt. "Because I was too busy reading about your afternoon in the Lover's Suite." The room went deathly silent. The air conditioner hummed. sounding like a jet engine. Daniel's face didn't crumble. He didn't look guilty. He didn't panic. His face hardened into a mask of pure ice. He dropped the towel on the floor. Where did you get that? It was in your pocket, I said, stepping toward him. You lied to me. You said you were with clients. You were with her, Bella, or whatever her name is. He laughed, a short, cruel bark of a laugh. You went through my pockets. That's rich. That's really rich, Sneha. Violating my privacy like a common thief. You're cheating on me, Daniel! I screamed, the tears finally bursting forth. You treat me like garbage. You tell me I'm worthless. You control every penny I spend, and meanwhile you're out spending our savings on whores. The slap came out of nowhere. It happened so fast my brain couldn't process it. 1 second he was standing 3 feet away. The next, his hand connected with my cheek with a sickening crack. The force of it knocked me sideways. I stumbled, my hip slamming into the corner of the dresser. I fell to the floor gasping. My face burned. My ear was ringing. I touched my cheek, shocked. He had pushed me before. He had grabbed me, but he had never struck me. Not like this. I looked up at him. He was standing over me, breathing hard. His eyes were wide, but not with regret, with rage. Don't you ever call me a cheater, he hissed, pointing a finger at my face. I am a man. I have needs. Needs that you, with your depression and your constant whining and your baggy clothes, don't meet. You think I want to go elsewhere. You drove me to it. I drove you, I whimpered, clutching my hip. You abused me, Daniel. Abuse? He crouched down, getting right in my face, the smell of his expensive toothpaste mixed with the lingering scent of alcohol. You want to talk about abuse? Abuse is coming home to a miserable wife who contributes nothing. Abuse is having to pay for everything while you play house. I'm leaving, I sobbed, trying to scramble backward. I'm taking Leo and I'm leaving. He grabbed my hair. He yanked my head back so hard I thought my neck would snap. I screamed, clawing at his hand. You aren't going anywhere, he whispered into my ear. Listen to me closely, because I'm only going to say this once. You leave, you lose. You think a judge will give custody to you. A woman with no home, no savings. A woman who I can prove has a history of mental instability. I'm not unstable, I cried. Aren't you? He smirked. You seem pretty hysterical right now, Sneha. Look at you, on the floor, crying, screaming. If the police came right now, who do you think they'd believe? The vice president of a Fortune 500 company calmly explaining that his wife is having an episode? Or the immigrant woman screaming like a banshee? He let go of my hair, shoving my head toward the floor. You have no power here, he said, standing up and adjusting his waistband. You exist because I allow you to exist. You eat because I pay for the food. You sleep because I pay the rent. If you walk out that door, I will freeze every account before you reach the elevator. I will file a kidnapping report if you touch Leo. I will bury you in so much litigation you won't be able to breathe for the next 10 years. He looked down at me with pure disgust. Now get up. You look pathetic. Fix your face, and if I hear one more word about my personal life, I'll give you a real reason to cry. He stepped over my legs and walked out of the room. I heard the living room TV turn on. He was going to watch the game. Just like that. I lay on the carpet, curled into a ball. My cheek was throbbing. I could feel the heat radiating from the skin. It was already swelling. I wanted to die. In that moment, I truly wanted to just stop existing. The pain wasn't just physical. It was the total, absolute realization of my helplessness. He was right. That was the terrifying part. He was right. If I called 911, he would spin it. He had lawyers on speed dial. He had money. I had a checking account with $40 in it and a bruise on my face that he would claim was self-inflicted or an accident. And Leo, my sweet, innocent Leo. If I lost custody, if I left him alone with this monster, Daniel wouldn't hit him. Not yet, but he would destroy him. He would turn him into a mini version of himself, or he would neglect him, leaving him with nannies while he chased women. I couldn't leave Leo. I dragged myself up. My legs felt like lead. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was a wreck. One side of my face was bright red, the imprint of his fingers clearly visible. My lip was cut. I must have bitten it when I fell. My eyes were swollen shut. I turned on the faucet to drown out the sound of my sobbing. I washed the blood from my lip. I pressed a cold washcloth to my cheek. Lipstick and bruises. That was my life now. He wore the lipstick of another woman and I wore the bruises of his anger. I opened the cabinet under the sink. My hands were shaking as I moved the cleaning supplies aside. Way in the back, taped to the underside of the pipe, was a small Ziploc bag. I pulled it out. Inside were $300. Cash I'd skimmed from the grocery budget over the last 6 months. months, $5 here, $10 there. It was nothing. It wouldn't even pay for a motel room for 2 nights in this city. I stared at the money and a wave of hopelessness crashed over me, so heavy I almost fell to my knees again. I was trapped. I was in a glass box suspended 1,000 feet in the air and the oxygen was running out. But then I looked at my reflection again. The bruise was darkening. It was ugly. And suddenly I realised something. He didn't hit me because he lost control. He hit me because he wanted to break my spirit. He wanted me to be too scared to move. He wanted me to stay in the corner, quiet and submissive. But pain is a funny thing. Sometimes it breaks you, but sometimes it wakes you up. I touched the tender skin of my cheek. Okay, I whispered to the mirror. Okay, he had the money, he had the lawyers, he had the power, but he had made a mistake. He thought I was weak and he thought I was just the scared little girl he picked up in an elevator 5 years ago. He didn't know that a mother protecting her child is the most dangerous creature on earth. I put the money back. I washed my face. I applied a thick layer of concealer over the bruise. It didn't hide it completely, but it dulled the red. I unlocked the door. I walked into the nursery. Leo was asleep, his chest rising and falling in a gentle rhythm. I stood over his crib, my shadow falling over him. I promise you, I whispered, my voice cracking, I won't let him win. I don't know how yet, baby. I don't know when, but we are getting out of here. I went back to the bedroom. Daniel was asleep on the couch with the TV on. I lay in the empty bed staring at the ceiling. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I couldn't fight him legally. I couldn't fight him physically. I had to play dirty. If he wanted to paint me as the villain, fine, I would play the villain, but I wouldn't be the unstable wife he expected. I would be the wife who survived. But as I closed my eyes, I didn't know that the walls were closing in faster than I thought. My body was at its limit. My mind was fracturing. I was one step away from the edge, and tomorrow something was going to happen that would force me to look down into the abyss and decide, do I jump or do I push him? The concealer was called full coverage, but that was a lie. There isn't a makeup product in the world thick enough to cover the purple-black stain of a marriage that has rotted from the inside out. I stood in the harsh fluorescent light of the office bathroom, applying a 4th layer of beige paste to my left cheekbone. It was 10 a.m. on a Wednesday. Outside, the city was bustling with people rushing to meetings, buying lattes, living their lives. Inside stall number 3, I was trying to hide the fact that my husband, the vice president, the pillar of the community, had backhanded me because I dared to ask why he was sleeping with a girl named Bella. My hands were shaking so badly, I smeared the makeup onto my collar. Damn it, I whispered, my voice cracking. I grabbed a rough paper towel and scrubbed at the fabric, but the stain just spread. Like everything else in my life, the mess was just getting bigger. I walked back to my desk, keeping my head down. My co-workers were talking about their weekend plans. We're going to the cottage, Sarah from HR said, beaming. Mike wants to teach the kids how to fish. I sat in my chair staring at a spreadsheet that blurred into meaningless grey lines. A cottage, fishing, a husband who wanted to spend time with his family. It sounded like a fairy tale from a different planet. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. Don't forget, dinner with the Millers tonight, 7 p.m. Wear the black dress. And for God's sake, fix your face. You look like a ghost. He knew he had hurt me. He knew I was in pain. And his only concern was that I didn't ruin the aesthetic of his dinner party. I couldn't do it. I physically couldn't do it. The air in the office felt thin, like I was breathing through a straw. The walls were closing in. I stood up. I didn't log off my computer. I didn't tell my supervisor I was leaving. I just grabbed my purse and walked out. I walked past the reception desk, past the security guard, and out onto the busy street. I needed to hear a voice, a familiar voice, someone who remembered Sneha before she became this. I dialed my father's number on WhatsApp. It was late at night back home, but I knew he would be up. He answered on the 3rd ring. Sneha, is everything okay? It's late here. Baba, I choked out, leaning against the brick wall of a coffee shop, trying to hide from the wind. I can't do this anymore. Can't do what? His voice was sharp, alert, not worried, but annoyed. He hated drama. Daniel, I sobbed. He hit me, Baba. He's cheating on me. He has a girlfriend. He controls all the money. I'm scared. I want to come home, please. I just want to take Leo and come home. There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy silence that stretched across oceans. Hit you? He finally asked. How bad? Does it matter? How bad? I cried. He hit me. My face is swollen. I'm living in a nightmare. Sneha, listen to me, he said, his tone shifting to that lecturing voice he used when I got a B in math. You are in America. You are married to a very powerful man. Do you know what people here think of you? They are jealous. They say, look at Sneha. She lives like a queen. If you leave him, if you come back here with a child, you will be nothing. A divorced woman with a child? Who will look at you? I don't care what people think, I screamed, attracting stares from pedestrians. I'm dying inside. Oh, stop it, he snapped. Stop being dramatic. Men make mistakes. He is stressed. He has a big job. Maybe you provoked him. Did you argue? You have a sharp tongue, Sneha. You always have. My knees buckled. I slid down the wall, crouching on the dirty pavement. You're blaming me? I whispered. I'm telling you to be smart, he said. Suck it up. Fix your marriage. Think of your son. Do you want him to grow up poor? Daniel can give him the world. Don't be selfish. Don't ruin the family name over a little fight. A little fight? He threatened to take Leo away from me, I said, my voice hollow. He won't if you behave, my father said. Go home. Cook him dinner. Apologise. Make it work. We cannot support you if you leave. You know our situation. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I just pressed the red button and severed the connection. I sat there on the sidewalk for a long time. People walked around me, stepping over my legs like I was a piece of trash. And maybe I was. My husband treated me like trash. My family treated me like trash. I was entirely, completely alone in a city of 3 million people. I stood up. I felt strangely calm. It wasn't peace. It was the absence of hope. When hope dies, fear goes with it. I started walking toward the subway station. I didn't have a destination. I just swiped my pass, the one thing Daniel allowed me to have unlimited use of, and went down the escalator. The air down there was stale, smelling of ozone and hot metal. I stood on the platform and it was midday, so it wasn't crowded. A few students, a tired-looking construction worker, a woman reading a book. I walked to the edge of the platform, to the yellow bumpy strip that warns you of danger. I looked down into the dark tunnel. I could see the faint lights of the next train reflecting off the steel rails. If I jump, I thought, it will be over in a second. No more fear. No more begging for money. No more looking at the bruise in the mirror. No more hearing Daniel's key turn in the lock and feeling my heart stop. It seemed so easy, so logical. I closed my eyes. I could hear the rumble. The train was coming. The wind pushed against my face, blowing my hair back. It felt like an invitation. Just one step. That's all it would take. One step forward and I would be free. The rumble grew to a roar. The screech of the wheels against the track pierced the air. The bright headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. My muscles tensed. I leaned forward slightly. The gravity of the void was pulling me. Do it, a voice in my head whispered. Nobody will miss you. You're a burden. The train was 50 feet away, 40, 30. I took a breath to brace myself. And then, Mummy, look, a train. The voice didn't come from beside me. It came from a memory, a vivid, piercing memory of Leo 3 months ago, standing on this very platform, pointing his chubby finger at the train, his eyes wide with wonder. Mummy! The word exploded in my brain like a grenade. Leo. If I jumped, who would pick him up from daycare at 3 p.m? Daniel wouldn't. He was busy. They would call his emergency contact. Daniel would send a nanny, or worse, his mother. Leo would wait by the door with his little backpack, watching every car, waiting for me, and I would never come. And then Daniel would win. He would tell Leo, your mother was crazy. She left us. She didn't love you enough to stay. He would twist my death into one last insult. He would raise my son to hate me. He would raise my son to become a man who treats women the way he treats me. The train roared past me, a blur of silver and light. The wind blast hit me hard, knocking me back a step. I opened my eyes, gasping for air, as if I had just surfaced from underwater. The train had stopped. The doors opened. People got off. People got on. I stood there trembling, sweat pouring down my back. I hadn't jumped, but I had been close. I had been 1 second away from letting Daniel destroy the only beautiful thing I had ever created. I turned around and ran. I ran up the escalator, stumbling on the steps. I ran out of the station. I didn't go back to the office. I didn't go home. I went to the daycare. It was only 1 p.m. I was 2 hours early. I rang the buzzer, breathless, my hair wild, my makeup streaked. The daycare director, Mrs. Gable, opened the door. She looked concerned. Mrs. V, is everything everything all right? You're early. I need my son, I panted. I need to see him. She hesitated, looking at my face. She saw the bruise under the bad makeup. She saw the desperation in my eyes, but she didn't ask. She just nodded. I'll get him. A minute later, Leo came running out. Mummy! I fell to my knees on the welcome mat and pulled him into me. I buried my face in his neck, smelling his scent, milk, crayons and innocence. I hugged him so tight, he squirmed. Mummy, you're squishing me, he giggled. I'm sorry, baby, I whispered, tears soaking his little t-shirt. I'm sorry, Mummy is here. I'm never leaving you, I promise. I held him there for 10 minutes, just breathing. He was my anchor. He was the only thing keeping me tethered to this earth. I took him to a park nearby. We sat on a bench and shared a pretzel. I watched him chase pigeons. I watched the sun hit his hair at the same shade of black as mine. I realised then that suicide wasn't an escape. It was a surrender, and I wasn't ready to surrender my son to the enemy. But I also knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. The woman who stood on that subway platform died today. The woman who walked away was someone else entirely. I checked my phone, 4:30 p.m. I had to go back. I had to face the monster, but this time I wasn't going back to beg for forgiveness. We entered the penthouse around 5 p.m. The apartment was quiet. I expected Daniel to be home later for the dinner preparation, but his briefcase was on the table. He was home. Sneha? His voice came from the living room. He walked out holding a glass of scotch. He looked at me, then at Leo, then back at me. Where were you? He asked, calm, too calm. The office called. They said you walked out at 10 a.m. They were worried. I was sick, I said, and taking Leo's backpack off, I picked up Leo. Sick? He stepped closer, inspecting my face. You look like a wreck. Did you cry all day? Is that what you did? While I was working to pay for your life, you were wandering around the city crying. I was depressed, Daniel, I said, looking him in the eye. Because my husband hits me. Keep your voice down, he hissed, glancing at Leo, who was happily playing with his trucks on the rug. Don't bring your drama in front of the boy. He took a sip of his drink, then set it down on the coaster with a sharp clink. Actually, I'm glad you're home early, he said, adjusting his cuffs. We need to talk before the Millers get here. Talk about what? About Leo. My blood ran cold. What about him? Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a glossy brochure. He tossed it onto the kitchen island. It slid across the marble and stopped right in front of me. I looked down. St. Jude's Academy, Premier Boarding School, Switzerland. I felt the room spin. What is this? I've been thinking, Daniel said, casually picking a piece of lint off his suit. This environment is not good for him. You're unstable, Sneha. You're erratic. The crying, the depression, the sickness. It's affecting him. He needs structure. He needs discipline. He is 4 years old, I screamed. You can't send a 4-year-old to boarding school in another country. I can, he said simply, and I will. I've already spoken to the admissions director. My donation cleared this morning. He starts next month. No, I shook my head, backing away. No, over my dead body, Daniel smiled. It was a reptile smile, cold, predatory. Careful with your choice of words, honey, he whispered, but honestly, it's for the best. You'll have plenty of time to find yourself or whatever it is you do, and Leo will be raised by professionals, not a hysterical woman who can't even keep a job. He looked at his watch. Now go get changed, the black dress, and fix that makeup. If you embarrass me tonight, the boarding school isn't the only change I'll make. I might just decide that you're too unfit to even visit him during the holidays. He turned and walked toward the bedroom to freshen up. I stood there staring at the brochure. Switzerland. He was going to take him. He wasn't waiting for a divorce. He was just going to ship him away. He was going to cut my heart out of my chest and mail it across the Atlantic Ocean. I looked at Leo. He was making vroom vroom noises with his red truck, and he looked up at me and smiled. Mommy, look, fast car. Yeah, baby, I whispered. Fast car. Something inside me clicked. It was the sound of a safety latch being removed from a loaded gun. I had stood on the edge of the subway platform today and almost died. I had faced the ultimate fear, and because of that, I wasn't afraid of Daniel anymore. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold mathematical clarity. He was going to take my son. Legally, I couldn't stop him. Financially, I couldn't fight him. Physically, I couldn't beat him. But there was one thing Daniel Vive cared about more than money, more than Leo, more than me, his reputation. He wanted to play games. He wanted to talk about unstable. I looked at the kitchen counter. The heavy block of German steel knives sat there. No. too messy. Too easy for him to spin as an attack. I looked at his briefcase, the one he left unlocked on the table, the one that contained his laptop, his confidential files, the secrets of his company. And then I remembered the dinner. The Millers, the CEO and his wife were coming tonight here. A plan formed in my mind. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was nuclear, but I had nothing left to lose. I picked up the brochure and ripped it in half. You want a show, Daniel? I whispered to the empty room. I'll give you the performance of a lifetime. I walked toward the bedroom, not to put on the black dress, but to prepare for war. Tonight, the penthouse wasn't going to be a dinner party venue. It was going to be a crime scene, not of murder, but of the total public destruction of a man who thought he was untouchable. I wiped the last tear I would ever cry for him. It was time to burn the house down. The black dress fit like a second skin. It was silk, backless, and cost more than my first car. Daniel liked it because it made me look like an ornament. He didn't know that tonight it was going to be my armour. I stood in front of the mirror looking at the result of his handiwork. I had applied the concealer, but not perfectly. If you looked closely, really closely, under the harsh light of a chandelier, you could see the yellowing purple shadow on my cheekbone. I wanted it hidden enough to play the part of the good wife, but visible enough to be a question mark. Mummy, why are you wearing shoes inside? Leo asked, sitting on my bed, swinging his legs. I turned to him. I had dressed him in his best button-down shirt. He looked like a miniature Daniel, which broke my heart, but he had my eyes. Kind eyes. We're playing a game tonight, Leo, I whispered, kneeling in front of him. A secret agent game. His eyes lit up. Like Spy Kids. Exactly like Spy Kids. Listen to me very carefully. When the people come for dinner, you're going to be very good. But when Mommy says the word popcorn, I need you to run to the laundry room, grab your backpack and put your shoes on. Can you do that? Why popcorn? Because that's the code word. And then we're going on an adventure. Is Daddy coming? I smoothed his hair, fighting back a sob. No, baby. Daddy has to stay here and clean up more. Sneha! Daniel's voice boomed from the living room. They're here. Get out here. I stood up. I took a deep breath. I looked at the woman in the mirror one last time. She wasn't the scared girl from the subway platform. She was a match waiting to be struck. I grabbed my phone. I checked the battery. 100% good. I would need every percent. I walked out into the living room. The Millers were standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, admiring the view of the Toronto skyline. Mr. Miller, the CEO, was a large man with a booming laugh. His wife, Patricia, was elegant, wearing pearls and a judgmental smile. Ah, there she is, Daniel said, walking over and placing a hand on the small of my back, and his fingers dug in a silent warning. Behave. Sneha, you look lovely, Mr. Miller said, extending a hand. Daniel was just telling us about the new acquisition in Tokyo. Fascinating stuff. Thank you, Mr. Miller, I said, shaking his hand. My voice was steady, eerie steady. Daniel is very dedicated to his work and to his family, Patricia chimed in, eyeing my dress. I heard about the boarding school in Switzerland. St. Judas? It's incredibly exclusive. You must be so proud to give your son such a head start. I felt Daniel's grip tighten on my waist. He was watching me like a hawk. Yes, I smiled, a tight, thin smile. It was entirely Daniel's idea. He believes in discipline. Smart man, Mr. Miller nodded. My boys went to boarding school, made men out of them. It's hard on the mothers, I know, but it's for the best. We moved to the dining table. The table was set perfectly. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery, white roses. It looked like a page out of a magazine. The perfect life, the gilded lie. The first course was served by the catering staff Daniel had hired. Lobster biscuit. I couldn't eat. My stomach was a knot of adrenaline. I watched Daniel charm them. He told jokes. He poured the wine. He played the role of the humble, hard-working executive perfectly. He touched my hand affectionately every few minutes, performing the happy marriage routine for his boss. So Daniel, Mr. Miller said, wiping his mouth, we're thinking about the VP promotion for the global division next year. With this move to Switzerland for the boy, it shows you're ready to prioritise the big picture. We need men who aren't tethered by domestic issues. Absolutely, sir, Daniel said, beaming. Sneha and I agree completely. She knows that my career is the engine that drives this family. She's very supportive, aren't you, darling? He looked at me. His eyes were cold, daring me to speak. This was it. I put my spoon down. The metal clinked against the china. The sound seemed to echo in the room. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the ambient jazz music, I'm glad you you brought up the topic of domestic issues, Mr. Miller. Daniel's smile faltered. Just a fraction. Sneha, honey, let's not bore them with... I don't think they'll be bored, I interrupted, turning to look at the CEO. You see, Daniel is a man of many talents. He's excellent at numbers. He's excellent at closing deals, but his greatest talent is storytelling. Sneha, Daniel said, his voice dropping an octave, a warning. You're tired. Maybe you should go check on Leo. Leo is fine, I said, reaching for my phone, which was sitting on the table. But since we're talking about the future and transparency, I thought I'd share a little presentation I put together. A toast of sorts to the real Daniel. What are you doing? Daniel stood up halfway, his face flushing red. Just showing them the family photos that you wanted me to organise. I lied effortlessly. I tapped the screen. I had already connected my phone to the massive 85-inch smart TV mounted on the wall behind Daniel. The screen flickered to life, but it wasn't a photo of Leo. It was a screenshot, a text message thread to Mark, divorce attorney. Date. Yesterday, message. I need full custody. The plan is to trigger her, make her look unstable. If I push her enough, she'll snap. I want her out of the house and the kid in Switzerland by next month. Make sure she gets 0 alimony. The room went dead silent. Mr. Miller froze with his wine glass halfway to his mouth. Patricia gasped. Daniel whipped his head around. He saw the screen. The colour drained from his face, leaving him ghostly pale. What the hell is this? He roared. Turn it off! He lunged for the remote control on the sideboard. I can't turn it off, Daniel, I said calmly, standing up. It's a slideshow. There's more. The screen changed. A photo. The receipt from the lover's suite. The timestamp. The order for oysters and champagne. Date, Tuesday, 2 p.m. You were in a meeting with the board on Tuesday afternoon, Mr. Miller said slowly, his voice dangerous. Or so you told me. It's fake, Daniel shouted, grabbing the remote and frantically pressing buttons. She's crazy. She photoshopped these. I told you she was unstable. Did I photoshop this too? I asked. The screen changed again. This wasn't a photo. It was a video. It was from the nanny cam I had hidden in the living room teddy bear months ago. Something I'd forgotten about until I went through the archives this afternoon. The video showed Daniel standing over me 2 days ago. It showed him grabbing my hair. It showed him shoving my face toward the floor. The audio was crisp. You exist because I allow you to exist. If you walk out that door, I will bury you. The silence in the penthouse was heavier than concrete. Patricia Miller put her hand over her mouth, staring at me with horror. She finally saw the bruise on my cheek for what it was. Daniel stood there, the remote hanging uselessly in his hand. He looked at the screen, then at the CEO, then at me. The mask was gone, the charm was gone, the monster was out. You bitch, he whispered. He didn't care about the CEO anymore. He didn't care about the promotion. He only cared that his property, his wife, had humiliated him. He grabbed a steak knife from the table. Daniel, no! Mr. Miller shouted, standing up. Daniel ignored him. He moved toward me, his eyes wide with murderous rage. I will kill you. You ruined everything. I didn't flinch. I didn't run. Popcorn! I screamed. At the same moment, I grabbed the heavy crystal wine decanter from the table and swung it with every ounce of strength I had left. I didn't aim for his head. I aimed for his hand holding the knife. A crash. The crystal shattered against his wrist. The knife clattered to the floor. Daniel howled in pain, clutching his arm. You're done, Daniel, I said, my voice shaking now but loud. It's over. I turned and ran. I ran to the laundry room. Leo was there, backpack on, eyes wide, wearing his shoes. Let's go, baby, run. I grabbed his hand. We sprinted for the service elevator in the kitchen, the one the caterers used. I knew Daniel would block the front door. I hit the button. Come on, come on. I could hear shouting in the dining room. Mr. Miller was yelling. Daniel was screaming my name. Things were breaking. The elevator doors opened. We jumped inside. I slammed the lobby button. As the doors were closing, I saw Daniel run into the kitchen. He was holding his wrist, his face purple with rage. Sneha, you can't run. I have your passport. I have your money. The door slid shut, cutting off his voice. We descended 42 floors, 41, 40. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. He was right. I didn't have my passport. I didn't have credit cards, but I had the phone and I had the recording. We hit the lobby. I didn't stop. I dragged Leo through the marble foyer past the confused doorman. Mrs. V, is everything okay? Call the police, I shouted over my shoulder. Apartment 42B, domestic violence now. I burst out onto the street. The cold Toronto air hit my face taste, stinging my eyes. It felt like freedom. An Uber was waiting at the curb. I had ordered it 5 minutes before the toast. Get in, Leo! I threw the door open and shoved Leo inside. I jumped in after him. Drive! I yelled at the driver. Just drive! Where to, Mum? Anywhere, just go. North! The car peeled away from the curb. I looked back through the rear window. Daniel ran out of the building. He was chasing the car on foot for a few steps, screaming, looking like a madman. People on the sidewalk were filming him. He stopped, panting, watching us disappear into the traffic. I watched him shrink until he was just a dot. Then he was gone. I slumped back against the seat, pulling Leo into my arms. He was crying softly. It's okay, baby, I whispered, kissing his head. The game is over. We won. My phone buzzed. It was a notification. Twitter. Upload complete. I looked at the screen. Before I left, I had set the video and the screenshots to auto-post to Daniel's company's official hashtag and the local news outlets. It was already trending. Daniel exposed. Hash domestic violence. Hash corporate predator. The comments were pouring in. OMG, isn't that the VP of Omnicorp? He hid her. That video is insane. He's done. Jail time. I turned off the phone. I didn't have a plan for tomorrow. I had $300 in cash, a backpack of clothes, and a furious, powerful enemy who would stop at nothing to find me. But as the city lights blurred past the window, for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel the weight of the invisible chains. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, but they were my hands. I looked at my son. He was safe. The road ahead was dark. I knew the legal battle would be hell. I knew he would try to destroy me in court. I knew I would probably have to live in a shelter for a while, but I smiled. A real, genuine smile that cracked through the heavy makeup and the pain. I had burned the house down. I had destroyed the golden cage. Mummy? Leo whispered, where are we going? I looked out at the highway stretching into the night, endless and open. We're going to find a new life, Leo. I said, a life where nobody hurts us. I closed my eyes and for the first time in forever, I didn't dread waking up. The nightmare was over. The fight had just begun and I was ready.